57talk.com, Scottsdale, Arizona. Gary Cubetta. We're back again, part 2, Skandor Akbar. Today, Skandor, we're going to talk about Mid-South, Louisiana, Leroy McGurk, and the great Bill Watts. Pleasure to have you with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Gary, and thanks for having me.
Great response, Skandor, to your first show.
Well, thank you very much.
Very strong.
And I appreciate that. And while we're on the subject of Mid-South, I might add that this is another iconic, legendary federation that endured, and it came along in the 80s, and which was a little tougher time. But Mid-South was solid. Yes, that's right, with a capital S. Now, shall we go back for a moment with the 70s and how everything came about? As you know, that Danny Hodge and I were partners, and it was the only time in my career that I was what's known as a babyface. Now, in 1972, we made the split. In other words, I turned on Danny, and then I became like one of the top heels, and I had a lot of heat, and I threw the fire there in 1972. Nobody had ever done that before. So I was very successful, North American Championship in 1974. Then I went to Australia in 1975, and I was Austrasian champion there. I stayed there for 7.5 months, came back to Leroy McGurk's, and Bill Watts, who was his partner at this time. So about 1977, I started what is a managerial career. In other words, I became a manager. Also, I would get back in the ring at times when things were needed.
In 77, were you mostly in the ring, or were you mostly a manager?
And well, in the 70s, up till about 77 and 78, I was in the ring. But going back to 1977, in 1978, I became a manager.
Now, were you starting to get injuries, or why would you?
Well, you know, I had such longevity and everything. We just, it wasn't actually an injury, but it was something we created to put me outside the ring for a while.
Okay.
Now, bear in mind, I still got into the ring on the special occasion.
Yeah.
And the first of my managerial duties was I had the masked medics. They were the first one that we did in that era. Now, Bill Watts had returned as a partner to Leroy in 1977. Now, shall we go forward?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Now, I had gone to Charlotte, North Carolina for just a short span, and then Dick Murdoch and Black Jack Mulligan had purchased the Amarillo territory in 1978 from the Funks. All right, that did not work out. The territory fell apart, so I returned.
Wait a minute, time out.
Yeah.
You worked with Mulligan and Murdoch in the Funk's old territory?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I want to ask you.
I went in there in its inception.
I want to ask you about that, because a lot of stories.
Yes, and I'll tell you exactly what happened.
Blackjack and Murdoch buy the territory. It doesn't work out. It goes bye-bye. But I never hear any details of what exactly went on and why it went bye-bye.
Well, I can tell you because I went in day one.
Okay, I want you to start on that first, then we'll get to Mid-South in a bit. We got all day.
All right.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I had gone and with Dick Murdoch and Mulligan, and they were in Charlotte at the time, North Carolina. So I went to Amarillo, and they had purchased that territory from the Funk brothers. And already it was an established territory. Things were going good, but there was somewhat of a glitch in there as the partners. I think that they took the wrong avenue at a crossroads in paying. I shall be frank about this. I remember one instance when Andre the Giant had gone in, and he was very, very dissatisfied with what he got paid. And I really think at that time, and Dick Murdoch was just a tremendous friend of mine, you know, and I think at the time they still did not have that. We have a territory. They were booking themselves in and out. So I shot an angle with Brute Bernard, and we sold out Albuquerque and Amarillo. That was the only highlights of that territory at that time. So finally, they both just left.
Who,
so,
Murdoch and Mulligan?
Yes.
They disappeared?
Well, so to speak, they just booked themselves out. And
So
I said before, I don't think that they were ready for a territory.
So
had they concentrated, this thing would have been good.
So
because it was established.
When you first came in, how was the attendance?
Very good.
It was.
Very good. You had local promotions in Amarillo, Edie and Jerry Kozak, which were really in with Amarillo. You had Nick Roberts in Lubbock, Mike London in Albuquerque. They were all established over the years, even before the Elder Funk got in there with Doc Sarpolis and Dory Detton years ago. They had good established promotion there.
Did they have a good TV show?
They had an excellent TV show. It was Saturday. It was shot in Amarillo on Saturday afternoons, and it was excellent. And also, the bicycle, when we bicycled the tape around the territories, and on Sunday morning we'd go to Albuquerque and make live interviews for the show, which was 6 p.m. in the evening, and it was highly successful. So there was no reason why that territory wouldn't have gone.
I've heard that the territory was set up, though, that you had to have a funk on the card, Terry or Dory or Early or Dory Sr. Now, obviously, they sold the territory. They're not going to be on many of the cards anymore.
No, I don't. I don't agree with that statement. That it would certainly have helped, and they did work very sparingly at the beginning. But we had things where we had very, very good talent there, and I think that, like I said, Brute Bernard came in. He had a vengeance against managers. He had done something with Gary Hart, Dallas. So I did it over there to where I burned. I threw the fire at Brute Bernard. We came back in the big towns, Albuquerque, Amarillo, Lubbock, and so on, in spot shows, and that was the biggest thing that they had. But as time progressed, they just lost interest, Gary. It just and like I say, that one avenue they took as far as the paying aspect of it. I think that that they made the wrong person a little peeved about that. So consequently, they booked themselves out, and the territory dissolved.
What do you mean they booked themselves out? I don't get that.
Well, they just booked themselves out of the territory when on certain days, like.
Oh, they weren't on. They were on some cards, but not on all the cards.
Yeah. Of course, that continued That continued from the beginning, but it got worse at the end, and then the Kozaks were left holding the bag, and then Albuquerque.
How was the attendance near the end?
Well, they were holding the bag because they had the promotion there, and at that time they didn't have a booking office, so Edie Kozak and Jerry Kozak were looking around. Okay, in 1979, when the territory dissolved in Amarillo, I went to Tulsa. Leroy McGurk and Bill Watt had split their partnerships. Leroy retained the north end. Bill Watts retained the south end and called himself Mid-South. Leroy continued, and we called it Tri-States Area. And when I went there, I took the promotional. I took the book for Leroy, and I stayed there until 1981. And when I went in there, Leroy only had 2 towns, Oklahoma City and Tulsa. So we got the old towns back, Springfield, Little Rock, Fort Smith, and some of the towns that had been pillars of that territory for years and years. So we had a successful 2 years. However, Leroy's family was into it, and it was tough at first, but we had things going, and finally I think that they were no longer interested, and Bill eventually bought Leroy's Inn out in 1981.
Now, did you see behind the scenes the problems between Bill Watts and Leroy McGurk?
Somewhat. After I worked for Leroy, you have to remember Leroy was blind. He trusted very few people, but he trusted me. And I think his family, which he had a wife and daughter, and she had married Brian Blair at the beginning, and then Doug Summers, and they were pushing for those boys to be on top, and they weren't top boys at that time. And I had a little, with chagrin when I was doing the booking, and I found out from Bill that it was a pretty tough road to hoe. So they had problems, but I think this has been exaggerated. I'm sorry. I think it's been just pushed out of proportion about their problems. Sure, they disagreed somewhat because Bill wanted to go and do a lot more things. But during the time he was there, he was making money for Leroy. I saw some of the bank deposits, and Leroy was he was just kind of relegated down to writing the publicity for the towns and everything. Leroy and Bill did it all, and I'll say that for Bill, he did it all. So finally, the family pressured, and they had the split. So the rest of it, is history. We did well for a while when I was booking there, but it was tough.
Let me ask you this. Bill Watts is in charge. Leroy McGurk is gone. And everyone has the perception that, Bill ran everything. But Bill physically and mentally couldn't run everything because to run a wrestling operation is an incredible amount of work. So
yes.
How involved was he with the day-to-day booking? Or was that left up? You said you were the booker. Buck Robley was one of the bookers. Bill Dundee a booker. How much of the work fell on their shoulders, and therefore how many of the creative angles fell on those shoulders?
Well, they did most of that. When you were booking, you did most of the angles because, there was no input from Leroy at that time. And also the family intervention at that point in time. And when you were booking, you did most of the angles. Yes, there was a lot of work, and I'm sure that had something to do with the split because Bill Watts probably felt that, hey, if I have my own place, at least, I can do all this hard work and I can derive more out of it. There's so much to that story, but I will say this, I think Bill became very despondent about family intervention in that partnership.
Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
So if, let's say you're booking an angle with Mid-South, do you have to run it by Bill? A big angle?
Well, usually Bill was the last one.
Okay.
But if you were booking the territory and somebody comes up with something like that, but Bill always okayed it. Make no mistake about that.
Right.
He was the man that okayed. He had the final word.
Right. So you'd come up with something, think it over, and then take it to Bill, and he'd give it the stamp of approval.
Yes.
Right.
Now, when I went in 1981, the Mid-South was rolling pretty doggone good. And, of course, those towns down there knew me because, I had been around that area for so long and had so much heat at that point in time. So when I went in, I was a natural, but I went in with the General's Army. So we started coasting along 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, and then 87.
Okay, we're getting ahead. Let's hold on. That's UWF. We're gonna get there.
Yes.
Let me ask you this: how was the relationship between Fritz and Bill, where you're kind of hopping back and forth between both? Did they?
Not good.
Okay, tell me about that.
Good.
Tell me about that.
Well, Fritz, Fritz also, and he claimed that they weren't getting anything out of their partnership. Now I told you earlier about Vern Gagne also being in there. So at that time, his answer was, well, we didn't make enough money to subsidize all three partners. Okay, so the relationship with Fritz and Bill wasn't good at that time. Later on, it became a little bit more formidable because, we started using the kids up there in the Mid-South area, the Von Erichs. But as far as the relationship, I think everything had blown over by the mid-'80s. But I'm going to tell you right there about 1981 and all that, it wasn't good. It wasn't good.
Did they mind that you were jumping back and forth?
No.
Okay.
And Ken Mantell had become the booker for Fritz, and Ken and I were very good friends, and we made a lot of money together, and this was a great opportunity. So both offices agreed. So I took my devastation, and I took the General's Army, and I worked two of those iconic, legendary territories, and I did very, very well, and I was thankful. And I had good talent, though, and I believe I mentioned before, well, I'll mention it now, that, I had double payoffs in towns because when I did an interview for Kamala in New Orleans, if I wasn't in New Orleans that day, I might have been in Fort Worth, but I got a double payoff for both towns. So
very nice.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
I want you to take us behind the dressing room door.
All right.
Everyone wonders, we've heard all kinds of rumors, what was Bill Watt like in that dressing room? I mean, I've heard stories from that he, would beat people up. What was it like? What was it like?
Well, of course, Bill, he was the owner, and Bill ran a very tight ship. This is not to say that he didn't laugh and joke, but I think it's blown out of proportion as he being a tyrant in the dressing rooms. That wasn't so, because in the A's, we were being approached by drugs and people not showing up for their shot and things that the great wrestling business, they didn't worry about that in the older days. So he had to do this. A lot of people didn't like him because he fined you if you were late. Now, he gave you 2 warnings, and all he asked was you to be 45 minutes to an hour preceding the show, and which is not taking much time out of a person's life and rest that time. But as far as the dressing room, to me, I got the impression that he was kind of tight, wanted everything to go, and once in a while, you'd see that explosion. But all in all, and I think you could ask a lot of people now, maybe not everybody, but they'd say, hey, I wished I had those days back again, because everybody was doing good, and we never had a lapse in that territory. Of course, the story about the junkyard dog and so on. But as for that question, no, I think that Bill was stern, but he wasn't the tyrant a lot of people want to think.
Okay, now let's take worst case scenario. Someone's been late. They continually are late. They come in late one night. You're in the dressing room. You see Bill. He's fuming, right?
Sure.
And
sure.
The guy comes in. How's Bill react? I know how I would react. I'd blow up. I don't understand why Bill gets criticized.
He would blow up a little, but he would take them aside. I never heard Bill chastise anybody. Now, I've been in the same area where he did, but I've never saw him chastise everybody. And before we did our televisions on Wednesday, he would always make some kind of a speech about how the territory and how we should do and how he should handle this. So I don't think he chastised anybody publicly in that dressing room. He was not happy. I can tell you that. When you were late and you got fined, no matter who or whom it was, you got fined. But he did give you some warning, and all he asked was 45 minutes. That was a minimum that before each match to be there.
How was it for you going between Texas and Mid-South, where in Mid-South we're running a very tight ship, and in Texas, just the opposite?
Tremendous difference there. Tremendous difference. Of course, it was all right with me because I was always punctual and on time, and I did a lot of traveling between the two territories. But I was always there on time, and I knew what was going on. I made interviews at both territories, so consequently, I was on top of everything. But I can tell you, as far as the tight ship, it really wasn't that tight in the world class area, but in Mid-South it was. So, we began to use some talent out of Dallas at Mid-South and et cetera. They would come down to world class, but more they would use talent from world class because, see, that Channel 11 was so powerful. It went in. I could name towns like Lawton, Oklahoma, Texarkana, Arkansas, Texas, that it was saturated between Mid-South and world-class TV. I mean, both of them just hit in there, and can you imagine what you could draw in those towns?
Well, it'd be tremendous. I mean, Bill's running a great ship with great angles, and then I remember he brought in the Von Erich boys quite a bit. Now, when he would bring in the Von Erich, did they come into the dressing room in the same form as they would in Texas, or were they afraid of Bill?
No, believe it or not, they came in on time. But let me say this, Bill, he loved long finishes. And, he got that from Eddie Graham, which was good. And the only thing is, when you give one to the Von Erichs, we would always tell him, said, hey, listen, he said, well, that's a simple deal. They should be able to do that. I said, it may be simple, for us, this long deal, but for them, it's not, because they weren't taught that way. They didn't go through all that. All they had to do was telegraph the claw or get the claw, and that's all you needed with those boys. And you know what? In Oklahoma and Arkansas and all of Mid-South, Louisiana, it was the same way. So the only problem is they could remember a lot of things that Bill wanted them to do. So we did the old detour, the shortcut.
Yeah, because the Von Erichs would just have a great match and then a quick finish. And Bill, I remember you called a long finish a complex finish where it would have different elements to it, maybe a couple of false falls, false finishes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. like I said, and actually, we had a little microphone, a little tape that we'd send back to a dressing room sometimes, and he'd put all that on there for Gavin or Kerry or whomever, David at the time. So we had to tell him this is not going to work this way because they're not going to remember all that. So what we did, it was everybody agreed, and it was very successful. They helped us a lot up there.
Skandor, TV-wise, Texas was much better than Mid-South. Maybe not as far as the quality of the matches in both was great, what was put on TV, but technically, World Class was better. Did Bill ever ask you about how they did their production, or did he know and he just didn't want to go that far?
Well, it was a unique production down here, on Saturday nights. There was, for years and years, they did it, and they did it live, and when he purchased the Christian station over here, it was fledgling, getting ready. Channel 39 was getting ready to file bankruptcy, and he purchased that, and that made the caboose for Southwest Sports in Fort Worth, and it just doubled everything. It was unbelievable. So we did television on Saturday night, and we had to keep the two company names separately, Southwest Sports and then World Class Wrestling on Channel 39, which was the same thing. So both stations, we would take an angle from 11, play it on 39, or 39 on 11 if we needed to do that. So when you couple those things together, just think of the power and the viewing power. 39 came on Sunday morning, was unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm talking about it more from a Mickey Grant aspect, the way it was filmed.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Did Bill ever say, hey, go get me that Mickey Grant?
Oh, yeah. Well,
you get where I'm coming from. Bill did great TV as far as the quality of the matches, but the production was fairly straightforward and simple. World Class had this incredible production from the early 80s, courtesy of Mickey Grant. I'm just wondering if Bill ever wanted to go down that road that early.
Perhaps, but I think he was happy with that format. It was done in the Irish McNeil's Boys Club in the later days in Shreveport on, I think it was every other Wednesday. So, of course, we got what we wanted on that, and you can see how successful it was. And yes, I agree. World Class had probably the best production, but, for what Bill had, you can't count that Mid-South out because, we bicycled around. And remember this now, with the exception of New Orleans, when Bill first went down there, the largest city he had was New Orleans. They had Dallas, Fort Worth, around here, San Antonio. But when Paul Bosch went to Houston, when he went to Mid-South, of course, it solidified a lot of large cities. We had a lot of population. But as far as the television production that Bill offered, I think he met his criteria on that. I really do.
It was good enough. And I'm talking production, not matches, because obviously the product that you saw in Mid-South was compelling, I'd say the least, way ahead of its time.
Right.
And, both territories did very well with that. Let me ask you about some of the guys you managed at the time and give me a little insight of what they were like. Kamala.
Kamala was I had known Kamala a couple of years back when he was Sugar Bear Harris. My cousin had started him out, Mephisto, and around Mississippi when George Culkin had broken away from, of course, that's another story. Now, he was Sugar Bear Harris, then we sent him out, and then he came back as Kamala, and he got over so tremendously in Mid-South, and he was always with me. He was punctual, and we had Frank Dalton, who was Friday, and he was always ready. But he would always check his money, and that was the name of the game, is how much money you made. And sometimes he would complain a little bit about the money, but I see Kamal, and as a matter of fact, I'll see him on June the 27th. But he'll say, that was pretty doggone good days, and he will tell you that Bill Watts was the best promoter he ever worked for. If you ever interview him, he'll tell you that.
Skandor, I want to stop you right here, and I don't want to. Let's not include Bill Watts in this, but the other promoters. I've interviewed Buck Robley, and he's told me consistently that the wrestlers were underpaid in most territories, that the house was not correctly, the addition on the house was never correctly done. Now, I've asked other people, I won't name them, but they said that Buck had a legitimate beef in that area. Was that a problem in the business?
Oh, sure. Okay. Nobody was ever happy.
But were they not happy for a good reason or just not happy?
Well, here's the thing. What you made, if you made they complained about the David Von Erich Memorial and all this. And Bill, they complained a lot about the money. Sure, maybe it wasn't as much as everybody thinks it should have been, or it should have been. But, you know, sometimes they had a lot of expenses. Now, I'm not taking up for all the offices, or I'm not beating the drums for this particular promoter or this particular promoter. Sure, there is a beef, but really and truly to run, and especially in the later days when it was creeping up, when expenses started getting more, I think the money that you made people happy, but you know, there was always people that beefed. You know, and there was I got promoted. I got some payoffs that I didn't think was too good.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
Yeah, that was part of it, Gary. That's what I'm saying. This was part of wrestling.
Okay, fair enough.
That was part of it. Now, you couldn't go anywhere. I'm talking about North Carolina and their big heyday and all that stuff. You just couldn't. You know, back when I started, there were some people that like people that I'd never heard of. Joe Dusick had a little Terry. He was the best payoff man I've ever seen, and Leroy McGurk was too. But just going back, you know, that was just part of the business. You're going to hear that.
Okay, I'm going to give you another name. Brickhouse Brown.
Brickhouse Brown. I know Brickhouse Brown. Yes.
Do you know him to this day?
I haven't talked to him in a while,
okay,
but I do know him, and we tried to give him a good push around here, so I know him very, very well.
Can you say how he was? I heard an interview with him recently, and he sounded like a piece of work, so.
Oh, yeah, he did a lot of things. And he was beginning to get over.
Okay.
But, you know, when you come into Mid-South at that time, the Junkyard Dog was the thing. And if we have a moment, I'd like to add something to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Back when Leroy and Bill were still together, and probably 77, he came in under his real name, Sylvester DeRitter. And he was so bad, I mean, he didn't know how, nobody taught him how to work, nobody taught him anything, and they told him, said, maybe you need to come back someday. And they gave him his notice after 3 or 4 days. So he came back as the Junkyard Dog, and of course the rest is history. But when a great black athlete came in to Mid-South, you know, there was, what do you do for an encore after JYD? It was hard. And when JYD went to New York, we tried, several people. So it's, you know, there you go.
Now, JYD, a lot of people today was, well, he couldn't work in the ring. He didn't know how to work. He wasn't a work, couldn't. But I remember watching JYD on TV, and I'm talking in Mid-South, and that didn't hold him back one bit. You don't have to be a great worker to be a great performer.
No, I could name you people that have mechanically in that ring weren't the greatest workers of all, but JYD just had that charisma. And see, that's the difference in selling and dying. A lot of people don't understand that when JYD got in trouble, they knew some way, hey, this man will fight with all his heart. And you're right. You don't have to be mechanically a great worker. I can name Wahoo McDaniel. I can name Cowboy Bob Ellis. You probably never heard of him. He had very few, and he was over like a son of a gun.
Yeah.
But you know, he didn't do all that mechanics. JYD didn't do all the leapfrogs and all this stuff. But they believed in him because he knew the difference in selling and dying. And there is a great deal of difference.
Skandor, we're talking about JYD and his not being a great worker, but it certainly didn't affect his performance as a drawing card. But do you think that it was a mistake for so many in the business to start to kind of rate matches by 4 stars, 5 stars? And it seems that the game's become much more dangerous now, that you have to have such a good quality match for it to be considered a success.
Well, as far as the matches go, you know, it's how the people take them also. You know, you've got to equate that because, you know, you can have a great match mechanically out there, and a lot of times the people don't respond to it. But you got to equate how the people respond to the matches. And, you know, right now there's a lot of people that are these independents. There may be 3 or 4 people around there that can take the ball and run with it and work like we used to. So as far as grading the matches and everything like that, it's how the people accept it also. And that's what it is. You know, that's what you're doing. You're trying to get that match over to the people.
Yeah, I remember growing up. I grew up in the East Coast, World Wrestling Federation, and Superstar Billy Graham, who's considered a terrible worker. I remember when he was champion, the people loved watching him, and he couldn't do any of the moves.
Yeah,
so
right.
I think that
it's the same. You know, there is a point in time. You know, when you get over, over, and and sometimes you do just enough in that squared circle that people are there. They're going to buy it.
Yeah,
and you had a lot of great workers that were mechanically. I mean, they could do those high spots and everything like that, but they never got to that main event status. Yep. They were kind of like mid card, up and down.
And then you have guys like Abdullah the Butcher who do no wrestling.
That's right.
But have had careers 40 years, 50 years. So
yeah, that's right. And eat 15 hot dogs before his match. So,
what was Abdullah like?
Abby, he was all right. He was, he complained a lot about his money, but so did everybody else. But when I was over in Puerto Rico with him in places like that, he was fine. I've known him for a long time.
How was his diet? It amazes.
Diet? I don't know. It'd take you and I from here to
Skandor?
Yeah.
Okay, I lost you there for a minute. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about.
Take you and I from here to July to entertain his diet.
Yeah, it makes you wonder because the doctor's always telling me you got to lose a little weight,
Yeah.
And guys like Abdullah the Butcher, he keeps going. He's still wrestling to this day. It's amazing.
Yeah. Hello.
I got you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give you another name, Skandor, the Missing Link.
Yeah. We brought the Missing Link in Mid-South, and Bill and I and a couple of others came up with the name, the Missing Link, and he was Dewey Robertson. He was back in Leroy's old NWA for a while as a babyface back in the early 70s, and he had been in the central part of the United States, and he came in and he was really flat down, and he got that gimmick, and he worked it was tremendous.
That was one of the amazing before and after transformations I've ever seen. Dewey Robertson was just this, from Canada.
Nobody would ever put the two together if you put the pictures there.
Yeah. Did you think he got too much into the character?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay. I don't think so, but God rest his soul, he's a good man. The only problem is, he had that period of drugs that really took him down for a while. In the last days, though, he was doing very, very well. We didn't know he was sick.
Phone issues, folks.
Hello.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's the story of the Missing Link.
How about the great Kabuki? Give me some insight as to what he was all about.
Oh, Kabuki, he was, he started in Dallas. Well, I knew him as Takachio, his real name, and he was wrestling around the Kansas City area with, Pak Song. He was a tag team partner with Pak Song, and they got the idea about this over here in Dallas, about this Kabuki deal. So he was a good man too. He was a good man, and
he got over surprisingly well, right?
Yeah, yes, he did.
What was it? The Gary Hart influence? What got him over so well?
Well, I think he just wanted to do it. He just wanted to do that,
Because a lot of times wrestlers from Japan will be brought in the United States and they kind of don't get over as much as you would think they would, considering how strong they were in Japan. But Kabuki was a big exception to that.
Yes, he was. Yeah. He, as you say, he was an exception to the rule. And, of course, I had people like Killer Khan. He was an excellent guy. But Kabuki was very, very serious. He was like Kamala. He took care of his gimmick, and it was something that the people, they really bit into it.
Now, you managed Mark Lewin, and Mark is kind of mysterious because he did those angles with Kevin Sullivan around 85. He was the Purple Haze, and then he kind of disappeared, and no one's heard from him in like 20 years, and now he suddenly reappeared a little bit on the scenes as far as some of these fan fests. Can you give us some insight as to what type of person Mark is and why he might have disappeared?
Oh, Mark was just an independent. I don't think Mark really liked this business as much. He liked the money. He stayed overseas a lot, and when I was with him, he was a pretty straight guy, but now he was the one that really complained about money a lot. And I was in several different places with him, and got to know him, and there's not much more you can say about Mark Lewin. He was a good general in that ring, but he complained a lot too.
Skandor, is there someone you had during this time frame that you thought, oh man, this guy should get over huge, but he's just not getting that break? Was there one guy?
Really, I can't. Right now, scanning over my memory, I don't think so.
Phone issues.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't really think of anybody right now that because when we did all this, we made sure that we hoped we had the right person.
What did you think of Ric Flair? Not as
I can tell you a story about Ric Flair. In 1973, Dickie, Dusty, and Les Wolf and I took him to Japan as a rookie. He had 3 or 4 matches, and he was a rookie. Until this day, when I see Ric Flair, he'll tell everybody, I carried this man's bags in. Well, he was a rookie, and we treated, and he was great. He was great. He weighed about 295 pounds and had a burr haircut at that time, and he had worked 3 or 4 matches in Minnesota, and Dusty saw him. So that was in 73 in the summertime, and he was a rookie. And I know Rick. I respect Rick. I saw Rick's phone keep cutting out.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
It's not on our end. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I saw him have an hour Broadway match with Kevin Von Erich, which was tough sportatorium, and I thought that was a great accomplishment.
Tough? Why? Why was it tough?
Because it was hard for those boys to go that long.
Okay.
Because they weren't taught that. They were taught the shorter matches.
Oh, Kevin.
But we did this hour
with his intense.
And I threw my arms around Ric Flair and told him, I said, hey, that's great.
With Kevin's intense style, an hour's not easy unless maybe a tag.
Oh,
yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, and I watched and I could see Rick would have to start over something that he would institute in that match and couldn't get it done, and then go back to it, and finally he did.
We talked a little bit about Scott Irwin in the first taping we did. Do you if Scott had lived, do you think he could have been a really big star in wrestling?
Yes, I do. Yes, I surely do.
He had that super destroyer gimmick. Do you think that would have lasted, or do you think he would have come up with maybe more of a Bruiser Brody type appearance?
I think that Super D, he liked that.
Okay.
Now his brother didn't like it that much, but Scott liked it.
Scott was big.
Scott was a tremendous athlete.
Bill was a good athlete, but Scott...
Yeah, he and I roomed together a lot. I loved that boy, and it really hurt me when he passed away. It really did. I knew his little boy, I knew his family, and it was tragic.
Skandor, as you see so many of the boys dying today, it's got to be especially difficult for you since you were involved with so many of their careers.
Yes, indeed I was. And it really hurts, and it hurts me deeply because going back, and I always tell them, I said, not sounding like a broken record, but we would never had, back then the guys enjoyed maybe a 6-pack and girls and stuff like that, but now, the demons of drugs, and when that takes over, you have no shows, you have this, you have that, and of course, I've talked about that, and of course the curse of so many of the young boys dying, like 18, 20 of them dying around the sportatorium. But and the thing about it is, it's so sad in so many ways because some of those kids, I loved a lot of them, and I'll never forget them.
Do you think it's society going downhill, or just the wrestling business as far as the drug?
Well, I don't know. You look around and they tell me the motion picture industry and the concerts and everything like that. It's here in this country, but I don't know. When the territories lapsed here and everything, and a lot of the guys got out of the business, and there's just such a small window of somebody trying to get in the business now with the organizations they have. But I think there's a conglomeration of a lot of stuff going on that causes this, and it's like a cancer. It's like a cancer because there were so many, and then you look at Scott Irwin, he couldn't help it. But, Scott Irwin would have been a tremendous star because, he was conscientious. And there's a lot of them that are, but, when you get the demon of drugs, it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Skandor, if you had to compare Mid-South to Texas in the Supercard, the Superdome versus Texas Stadium, were they equally successful, or did one promotion have the edge over another?
I would say it was a toss-up, Gary. I would say they were just as good. However, when David, died, they drew that tremendous house over here in Texas Stadium, and, at that time it was a record attendance, but those Superdome shows and Texas Stadium, the equivalency of both of them, the Cotton Bowl, and then I think they were on the same plane. I tell everybody, world class in Mid-South were the tapes of the decade. Now, bear in mind, North Carolina was doing very, very well, but you know what? They wanted Mid-South because our TV ratings were better. You would get into that,
Yeah, I want to talk about about that. And you said that you were in the room when the negotiations went down with Bill Watts and the Crockett. Can you tell us a little bit about?
Well, actually, I was not in that particular. Jim Ross was the one that did that. Now, I was informed of everything that was going on. Now, I was in a meeting after they purchased Bill. I was flown to North Carolina with Eddie Gilbert, Jim Ross, Scott Muntz, and they told us that they would continue UWF and that we would be the people that ran it. So I may be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but that was 1987. And UWF went nationally, and I was against it. And I told Bill, I said, you know what, maybe we can just stay in our own backyard. But he was a little paranoid because the oil bust was happening, if you remember. Yeah. And he was, in the heart of his territory was Louisiana and the oil. So he was a little paranoid about that. But when this merger came about, with this buyout, and I was told, and I know for a fact that UWF wanted our television because our TV ratings were better than theirs.
Yeah.
Yes, they were. Yeah. They sure were.
Yeah.
And during that meeting, Dusty Rhodes was there, Jim Crockett. We stayed there 3 days. They put us up in the Adams Mark there, and they told us the first day at that office in Charlotte that they'd put New York out of business in 1 year. Well, sometimes you don't scatter shoot with your brain, and I said, what's going to happen a year from now? Well, I was long gone after that, but almost a year to the date, they had to sell out to Atlanta. But I think going nationally because the other people were doing it was wrong for Mid-South, because proof of the pudding is when New York came to Louisiana, it took them a long time to bust that. It took them a long time here in Dallas. They had Fritz and Carrie's Corner only do a $25,000 house in Reunion, and it took them a long time to really bust these territories because, Gary, we had the hometown pitch, is what I mean by that. The people thought that the boys were part of them and vice versa.
Do you think that Bill could have kept Mid-South going?
Yeah, I think he could have. I think he could have. He just became a little paranoid, and I really do.
Because I
really do.
When he went to UWF and started to broadcast all over the country, it was on satellite, and he never really got around to touring. He got to distribute his TV. I remember seeing the whole thing kind of a little bit come undone.
Mm-hmm.
UWF would run like a lot of hot angles, and the guys would disappear because they were going up to Vince.
Mm-hmm.
And it had the look of something that if it had been kept small, the people of Louisiana, Mississippi, you could have gone into Texas, pretty loyal, right?
Yes, like I said, if he would have stayed, so to speak, in his own backyard, he would still be doing it. And the same goes here in this area. And really and truly, when you look at it, North Carolina, see, they did all that stuff too, and that was their demise. That was their demise. So, nationally and stuff like that. But I really think if Bill is New York would never tried to come in, and I don't think they tried to come in on Fritz. I really don't.
Skandor, that's an interesting take on it. What you're saying is that instead of trying to expand out, the NWA could have saved itself by staying within, and therefore when Vince came into town, let's say Vince wanted to come into Reunion or someplace in Mid-South, he wouldn't have been able to draw because the competition would still be there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
The NWA actually, by expanding out, cleared the way for Vince to come in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. See, and remember what I told you about hometown pitch. A lot of people don't understand that, but that's exactly what we had here. And
people don't remember, but Vince, when he first expanded, had terrible times down south trying to draw crowds.
That's exactly right. Yes, he did. Yes, indeed. He had trouble in St. Louis and places like that, Kansas City, but he had bigger problems in Mid-South, and he had bigger problems over here in World Class.
Skandor, do you think in some ways that Vince is a little bit overrated as to what he did at that point in time? People look back, he came in and he had all these ideas and he had all these sellouts, but that's some of his ideas.
Well, let me say this. Yeah, as far as that, because, these territories, they wanted to turn over to their sons, et cetera, and things like that, and it didn't work out that way. So some of the old-timers were getting up and everything, and but I think that, he had a clear deal at that time when Fritz got out of it and Vern got out of it, so that was just an open door for McMahon to go in there and everything. But I think that he did have a hard time by doing a lot of that, but he had a tough time here. But you have to give him credit now. He took the business to another level. It's called marketing. Okay, we had, in the old days, we had plywood, like these little statues, but all the promoters couldn't get together, so we'd go from territory to territory. And I remember that years ago. It was way back in the 60s. So he did marketing, and, he's probably covered marketing-wise if he didn't draw another person as his deal. And you got to give him a little credit as far as, holding his territory and doing this and doing that. But as far as the credit for the demise of these territories, no. I think it's because they were just abandoned by the people.
Did you ever try and get in a room with Bill and say, Bill, you can't go national, this is not the way to go?
No, I didn't, but we talked about it.
And how'd the conversations go?
Well, I don't know. Jim Ross was there, and I was there, and I said, I don't think we need to do this, especially in California. We lost a lot of money going to 3-day tour in California. You had the trans and everything.
I remember that. I saw on UWF TV, you guys went into the Olympic Auditorium in this around 87, right?
Right.
What was that? How was the attendance?
Olympic was a little bit better than the rest of them. I think we did Orange County. We did that college down there in Orange County, and a couple other places, Oxnard or Ventura. I don't remember exactly, but I can tell you this, they weren't good. But Olympic was a little bit better.
It's interesting because people think of UWF as being a national company. And like I said before, it was from a TV point of view because almost everybody could get it. But there was very little touring, right?
Very little, very little.
Was that going to come, or did you get the feeling that it just never was going to come for Bill with that?
I don't, Bill, that's when he began to lose interest. I really do. I think that he thought by going that he would be competing if he went nationally. But you know what? You could probably talk to him today and say, hey, if it stayed in his backyard, they would never done it.
Well, he did have a chance to go now. There's another way to look at this. He had a couple of deals. Well, actually, one deal with Ted Turner. Do you remember when he was on the Superstation in '84, Channel 17?
Yes, briefly.
If he had Turner with him, that would have changed everything because Turner was just taking over the world at that point in time. And
he tells me, Ted Turner, 1966, when I was first, my first trip to Atlanta, we had WQXI, which was the future Superstation, 17 miles out of Atlanta, and he was borrowing money every week to stay alive. That's right, Ted Turner. And, Ray Gunkel was there and everything. So, he was a giant, and he loved wrestling. He loved it. He loved it in his last day, the last days of the promotion. And he had an ego. Somebody told him, said, well, everybody's boasting about how they put you out of the business. This guy reached down and got millions out of his pocket and said, no way, no way.
You're talking Ted Turner, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you think if Bill had made a deal with Ted that the wrestling world would look quite a bit different today?
Well, it could be. It depends on how they would get along. Bill was strong-headed, and they tell me Ted Turner was. He didn't like air conditioning. So, yeah, that's a true story. Yeah, when they built that CNN, he didn't want. He said people need to sweat to work right.
That's beautiful.
So how you gonna couple Bill Watts and Ted Turner? I don't know.
Well, maybe if the money.
It could have been, but Bill was a good businessman now.
Well, if the money,
and he saw something that was advantageous to his cause, he's going to do it. He's going to do it.
If the money's pouring in, suddenly it's not so.
Oh, yeah.
Was Bill? Do you remember how upset Bill was when Turner reneged on the deal in '84?
Yeah, he wasn't visibly, but you could tell it was kind of eating inside. But he just kept on going.
That was his best shot to go national. So you didn't want Mid-South to expand, and
I really did. I thought we had what we had, and proof was it took New York a long time to come in and do some business. It took them a long time.
As you see the UWF start the downhill descent, what are you thinking?
Well, we don't know. We had rumors of this buyout.
Okay.
So even Crockett himself came down 2 or 3 weeks before it happened and was in the dressing room and met everybody and everything. So we knew the rumors had grown, So, at that point in time in my career, I'm saying, I don't know what's next, but I've got this good longevity and maybe something else will come along, and it did.
Which was?
Well, I went to Charlotte, and I stayed there for a while.
How long did you work with Crockett after he purchased UWF?
About 8 months.
8 months. Okay, that's what I want to talk about next is those 8 months, because it's very controversial. A lot of people say they should have run promotion versus promotion, UWF versus NWA Crockett. Were you one of those people who thought that was the way to go?
When they first did the buyout, they said it was going to be Mid-South against whatever they call it, Mid-Atlantic. Okay, and they said, they told us at that meeting up there that that's the way it was going to be, that we'd run Mid-South. Well, it didn't happen that way. You know, they started gobbling up the TV, so it made one deal, and they had a little office for me and Eddie Gilbert over here, and about after 4 or 5 weeks, we were relegated sitting down on Dallas phone books. All the furniture was going, so that was a handwriting on the wall on that. They opened up they spent so much money, they opened up a huge office in Addison. That's high dollar over here, and really did need it, but it was Mrs. Crockett, you know, she was the matriarch, was still alive. She's the one that pulled them back in 1988, because they had those bashes in 87 doing good, but, you know, it's common knowledge they'd go, 3 or 4 of them would go and gamble in Las Vegas after the matches and everything, use that private plane. So, you know, consequently, she you know, made them come back to the Charlotte area, and I didn't stay there that long after. Well, but I do know a year from when I went there.
I think what happened, Skandor, is they made I heard an interview with Ric Flair, and he said they made $33 million in 1986.
I don't doubt that.
So they were on top of the world. But what happened was 87, things started to drop off significantly. They had a stagnation of talent. Late 87, 88, the UWF purchase. That brought in a lot of fresh talent. But while you were there, did you think, oh, man, they're just not doing this thing the way it needs to be done?
Yeah, on occasion I did, because they had a lot of talent they didn't need. You know, they stacked those cards with a lot of talent. And the nucleus that was people that wanted to come see, you know, that was fine. But they stacked those cards. They spent a lot of money, and they had this swagger about them, especially Crockett and all of them, that they said, well, hey, you know, we're going to put New York out of business. So, you know, I think that that period you're talking about, yes, I saw everything wearing completely down. I really did. And although they were still drawing somewhat, the money they spent on transportation, going across the country and going to those gambling deals afterwards and everything like that, started taking the toll.
I'm not sure if it was 87 or 88, but they had a lot of Great American Bash outdoor stadium shows, and some of them had horrible attendance, 2,000 and 3,000 people. Were you at those shows?
No, I was on the ones that were doing pretty good. Now, in 87, when I was there, they were doing pretty doggone good.
Okay.
And actually, when I was still with Bill, I went to one of those bashes, and I took Kamala, and we did a couple of matches with Magnum TA outdoors, and that was when they started all those bashes. But getting back to 87, they were good, but in 88, they were horrible. You know, it just wasn't there anymore.
Okay, so you were at some of the bad ones.
Well, yeah, I started with the bad ones, but like I say, I started 87. I left there in probably March of 88.
What I'm trying to get at is I'm just wondering what it's like to be in a 60,000-seat baseball stadium with 3,000 fans in the seat, but you never saw that?
I never saw that.
Okay.
I really didn't. I left before, but I did see, you know, a substantial drop, but I wasn't in anything like that.
Did Crockett and Dusty seem to be more anxiety, more upset, more nervous, or you didn't really notice it?
Oh, sure, he was nervous, but you know something? They all had egos. The whole family did. So, with the exception of Mrs. Crockett, you know, but, you know, their dad was completely different, but they all had the egos, and I think they still, in their mind, thought that they were still king of the road. So, you know, it was a year when I went there at 87 that they had to sell to Atlanta.
Were you there during the sale to Crockett? I mean, to Turner?
No. Oh, no, I was gone.
You were gone by then. Yeah, it was very odd, because that's an odd period in time, and I haven't really found anyone who has the real inside scoop on it yet, because Crockett had made so much money, things started to go downhill. Mm-hmm. You bring in the UWF talent, and then suddenly the UWF talent is not used appropriately, and then starts to disappear, and then the sale to Ted Turner, and of course the rest is history.
Right.
And of course, eventually after the AOL purchased Time Warner, no more World Championship Wrestling, no more NWA for the most part. Kind of sad, right?
Yeah, it is sad. Yeah. It really is. It really is.
You know, I think Ted Turner, if he had shown more interest in wrestling from a business point of view, been more involved, he made CNN. Oh, yeah. He's got a whole slew of TV stations. How come he couldn't make wrestling work?
Well, at that point in time, what you're talking about, he got people that weren't familiar with the business and the behind the scenes. And my great friend Joe Hamilton was there for a long time, you know, when the assassin. Jody would tell me that they had guys that knew what they were doing around there, but they didn't want their input. If they did, they wanted to pick your brain. But I think Ted was kind of backing behind the scenes and letting people run it that had no business doing it.
Yeah, I've read a book about the creation of CNN, and CNN was not a success right from day one. Ted Turner made CNN go through just incredible hard work, and if he had been even a quarter as interested in wrestling from a business point of view, I think it'd be a lot different landscape today with Vince, because Vince, as strong as he is, never owned a TV network.
No.
And Turner had bunches of them.
Well, with the CNN and, the inception, everything that started, a lot of people said, well, who's going to watch news 24 hours a day? See, a lot of people were skeptical. Now you got NBC, you got all that stuff, Fox, but he was the one, he was the innovator. And a lot of people doubted that people were watching. I certainly wouldn't, but there's a lot of people that watch news 24 hours a day. So he made a success out of it.
Skandor, did you ever get a chance to come into the modern day World Championship Wrestling in the 90s?
No, I did not. They sent feelers out to me, and when Ross was there and Jody and all of them, and I did not go out. Did
you want to?
Well, I did for a while, but I had things going on here, and I had been away from home so much, so I just wanted to stick around here. But they did. They sent feelers out to me.
I think in some ways they modernized wrestling too much.
I think they did too. I think you're absolutely right.
If you look at Ultimate Fighting today, which has taken off and been so popular, it's really done in a very traditional manner, and people love it.
Yeah. I was up in Muskogee, Oklahoma about a couple of years ago, and they brought me up there as a guest to those people, that Ultimate Fighting.
Yeah.
And they introduced me in the ring, got a standing, ovation. I mean, boos and all that still yet. But I met, the inner workings, and the only problem is with that thing, the commission just takes a lot of money out of them. But they're making money now.
Yeah.
But you couldn't take a town. It was sold out. You couldn't take a town and run Muskogee, that size of town, but maybe twice a year if at the most. So they're doing it the right way.
Skandor, if you could magically take Mid-South from the early 1980s when things were going really good and bring it into 2009 and put it on a major cable network without all the big production value, just hardcore traditional wrestling, do you think it would, with the same stars, magically, if we could do it, do you think it would work today?
Yeah, with the right television, the right exposure. You know why? Because it would be different. Again, you've heard those things. They rehash old movies and stuff like that. But it would be different to what's going on now. It would be different, and the people would like it. Countless times, I'll probably get out today. Everybody recognizes me. It comes up and they ask me, when is it going to go back like it used to be? Maybe one out of 30 people ask me about the East Coast, what's going on. But everybody will say, and you'd be surprised, they know more about what I did than I can remember. But that's the way it is. They're in a huge nostalgic area, and I guarantee you it would probably do it. Matter of fact, I know it would.
Well, it's the same here, Skandor. When I'm interviewing somebody and it comes around to Vince and modern day wrestling, my questioning drops right off because it's just not interesting. I think there's a lot of, maybe it's the way the country's going. Things are going downhill, the economy. People want to go back to their roots. They want to go back in time. And I think if you took old school Mid-South and put it on TV today, I think it'd go crazy.
And certainly it would. And how many people will tell me, said, hey, it was rugged back then. You know what I'm talking about? They'll kind of whisper up to me and everything. I said, you're right. and you know what? They would support it. And I really think it would be good. It really would. Of course, with all the television, cable, all this stuff, it would take just a little while, but you'd have to get that exposure in the right way.
Well, I think Vince is so oversaturated with all his histrionics and soap opera. It's very difficult to get interested in that. I know he's got a big TV outlet, and people still watching. He's still making lots of money, but
consequently, he was the only kid on the block for a while, and you had the other promotion which loses a lot of money. She lives right here in Dallas, Dixie Carter. This TNA?
TNA, yeah. Do you think TNA makes a mistake by not? I always think they should go maybe a little bit more old school and hardcore. And
yeah, I do. and they got pretty good minds. They're Terry Taylor, my friends in there, and these independent promotions. I've used some of their guys and everything, but like I say, the window of opportunity for a young boy to get in this business right now is kind of small. But it's just too bad it wasn't like it was. But in answer to your question, yes, it would get over like gangbusters.
I've asked a lot of people that question, and they don't seem to think so. But Skandor, you and I are on the same wavelength on that.
And I know because of the nostalgic deal here and everything, and New York only comes here maybe once a year or somebody twice a year. But if you had it more locally here, it would be fine.
Yeah. Skandor, it's been a pleasure.
Hey, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so very much for having me. And all you wrestling fans out there, you're unique. There's no other organization, sport of any kind that has the loyalty that wrestling fans have given wrestling.
Skandor, you're a legend, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of experience in that mind. You've seen it all. I don't think people realize still how much you've seen in wrestling. It's just a pleasure.
Yeah, I really have, and like the intricate parts of it, and being in the right place when major things have happened. Yeah, I've done it all, and my God, I'd do it again. I really would. I love the business, and I have no regrets whatsoever.
Thank you, Skandor.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, Gary.
We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.